All right, welcome everybody to Chapter 4. This is a brand new chapter, and we're trying something a little bit different today. I've got my brand new Britney Spears microphone on here, see how that works. The other day, I'm recording this on November 30th, the last day of November, so this is the last video. You're going to see this wonderful stash because in December, it's no longer socially acceptable to walk around looking like a dangerous offender because it's November. That being said, what's in Chapter 4? Well, Chapter 4 has two topics. One is called workforce planning, and the second one is called recruiting. So basically, you do your workforce planning, which we used to call manpower planning, but somebody realized at some point that half the population, half the workforce was women, so we changed from manpower planning to workforce planning. Where was I? Okay, yeah, so it covers workforce planning and then recruiting, which is actually getting people to apply to your company. All right, so what do we got here? The key idea, workforce planning, which is determining the right number and types of labor, right people in the right place in the right time. So workforce planning is the basis for recruiting, which is attracting a qualified pool of applicants, not a swimming pool, but a pool of applicants, and or adjusting the workforce, so downsizing, redeploying labor, etc. So essentially, what workforce, the key idea here is with workforce planning, you determine if you need more or fewer or the same number and type of employees. And then once you determine that, you either go find them through recruiting or figure out a way to get rid of them, which is adjusting the workforce, downsizing, etc. All right, so as always, there are learning objectives. There are 5 learning objectives for this particular Chapter 4. The first 2 deal with workforce planning, and the last 3 deal with recruiting. So we'll go through these, like I said, as always, in excruciating detail. So let's start with the first one, which is learning objective 1. Discuss how to align, love that word align, which is like line up. How to align workforce planning with the organization's strategy. All right, so what does that mean? Essentially, in a nutshell, it means that, well, your company or your organization wants to do stuff, which is the strategy there, and you need to align your human resources with the stuff they want to do. All right, so to give you a concrete example of that is, you might take a place like Medicine Hat College, for example. One thing they want to do in the next couple of years is do 4-year degrees. In particular, they want to do a 4-year degree in education. All right, so how do I align my human resources with the fact that they want to do a 4-year degree in education? Do I have to hire more people? Do I have to hire different people? Do I have to take the existing people I have and give them more skills? All right, so that's one way to do that. That's one example. Another example, you might take the world's best hockey team, the Calgary Flames. Go Flames, go. And what they want to do, when their strategy, one of their goals and strategy is maybe win the Stanley Cup 5 of the next 5 years. It's an audacious goal. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, a number of different ways, but one key way we're going to have to do that is with our human resources. So we have to figure out the right mix of players that we're going to get in here in order to be able to win that Stanley Cup 5 years running. Dare to dream. Okay, so let's move on. We'll start with this slide here, which talks about workforce planning, which is a definitional slide. So it's the strategic use of human resources. Like the strategic use of marketing resources or financial resources can lead to competitive advantage for an organization. All right, so for example, we'll go back to the fact that Medicine Hat wants to get a 4-year degree in education. We talked about, okay, that's going to involve different use of the human resources, but that's also going to involve different use of facilities. Do we have the rooms to do that? Do we have the library to do that? Do we have the computing resources to be able to offer a degree? It also has to look at financial resources. Do we have the money to do that? Do we have the capital we can invest in the program? order to do that, right? So again, human resources like marketing resources or financial resources or facilities are one of the elements you use in your strategy in order to create a competitive advantage for your organization. All right, so then what is workforce planning? As I referred to it earlier here, is really the identification of numbers and types of employees needed for an organization to meet its objectives. So basically having the right number of people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. So if we're going to put a education program in here for your degree, we have to have the right number of PhDs who have skills in education in the right place, want to live in Medicine Hat at the right time by about 2025, 26 is probably when we'll get this done here. All right, so how do we go about doing that? How we go about doing that is something called the workforce planning process, and there are 3 steps. Number 1, the first one is to forecast the demand and supply for labor. Okay, second one, determine a forecast of a labor surplus or shortage. Okay, once you've done your forecast, do we have too many people? Do we have not enough people? So these 2 are kind of covered in the first learning objective. And then once we've determined we have either a surplus or a shortage, then we have to implement WP or workforce planning tactics to complement your organization strategies and meet the goals. So we need to adjust somehow. So that might be something like a layoff, or it might be something like going to a trade show to recruit people, right? If we need to attract people, okay? So those are known as tactics. All right, so again, that's more of a summary slide here. Take a look at that graphically. Okay, so maybe we'll start in the middle, goal setting and strategic planning. So one of our strategic intents here is to have that 4-year degree in education. All right, so let's take a look at our labor supply here. Do we have enough people in order to offer that degree with our existing? Probably not. We probably need a few more instructors, and we also probably need instructors with a higher qualification. All right, so that's our internal supply here. So are a lot of those people around? Yeah, there probably is. Now, forecasting the demand then, are there other people who want these PhDs? Yeah, there are people who want to demand as well, right? All right, so anyway, internally, we're going to have a shortage in this case. Okay, so we don't have the right people, so we have to do something to alleviate that shortage, right, in order to get the enough people to teach that 4-year degree. So that might be things like, well, going out and recruiting and hiring new PhDs, or it might be looking at taking some of the existing instructors we have, getting them to get a PhD. All right, so those are an example of program implementation evaluation. All right, and at the end of that, you say, all right, we were trying to look for 3 more PhDs in education. Did we get those 3 more PhDs in education? Yes, we did. Life is good, and we're on to the next thing. All right, so the first step then is forecasting. So forecasting essentially is, this is the keyword here, is to predict. Okay, predict which areas the organization will experience labor shortages or surpluses. Okay, so we could look at an area like, we talked about education, and we're going to predict because there's a new program coming in, and we'll need more people because we're putting courses, we're going to have a labor shortage in the education area. We might look at our power engineering area, all right, and we can see, if we take a look at the economy right now, that gas, at least in this area, natural gas is sort of declining, right? So there might be a less of a need for us to have power engineering instructors. However, if we look further north up to the Grand Prairie area, there is LNG Canada project is coming in 2022. So actually there might be even more of a need for power engineers. So perhaps there might be less of a local need for power engineers, but there might be a more provincial need for power engineers. So maybe we don't have to adjust our labor force in the power engineering department here at Medicine College. And then what about business? Okay, business instructors. Okay, well, it's local economy is looking at flat maybe the next couple of years. Probably number of students will probably be flat. All right, take a look at the age of the business instructors. Are most of them young or older? Well, there's a couple older ones, so we'll probably have to bring some younger ones in or people in to replace them there. So there may likely be a shortage in the business area. All right. So babbling a bit here, but what I'm talking about forecasting is really predicting which areas the organization will experience shortages or surpluses. Okay, now to look at the supply of labor, we can look at both the internal supply and the external supply. So the internal supply, and again, if we talk about the college here, we'll go with that, is we look at the turnover rate. The turnover rate is how many people leave. And that could be for a number of different reasons. That might be they quit, okay, they find another job, they retire, they die, they go on sabbatical, they maybe have children and leave the workforce for a while. There's a number of different rates. So what's the turnover rate? Generally at a college, it's pretty low because it's a pretty sweet job. As somebody who did it for full-time for 29 years, yeah, it's just great. Okay, the other thing to look at in the internal supply is the skill sets. Okay, so if we look at the skill sets, we can look at, again, let's say we're going to need some vice presidents, maybe the president in the next 5 or so years. How many people right now who are deans and chairs and instructors really have the managerial skills in order to fill those positions? Okay, and if there's not a lot of people who do that, maybe we need to do something about it. Maybe we have to do some professional development there. The other way to look at the supply of labor is something called a replacement chart. Okay, and I'll show you one here, which gives. Okay, so this is known as a replacement chart, right? So this is a tool which you can use, which will help you figure out, how you can replace your managers. All right, so. What you do is you identify people who are currently in the organization who can move up and take a position. So that's what this does here. So a replacement chart like this will tell you, this person here, VR Garg, great word, Garg, like gargle. Anyway, Gargle, VK Gargle here, he is promotable, he, could be a she. She is promotable now, so they're A, promotable now, and above average performance. So they're ready to go into that position. If we look further down the list here, how about A Thapper? Okay, A Thapper is a C4. C, not suitable for the position and a poor performer. So why is he even on this chart? Because they're probably going to get rid of him pretty quickly. All right, what about RP Rayo here? He's a B1, needs development. Okay, so he's getting ready, but he's a superior performer. So he's a guy we got to keep our eye on here. All right, so this is known as a replacement chart, and it's a tool that can help you forecasting your internal supply of labors for management positions. All right, so those were your internal supply of labor. You also look at the external supply of labor, okay? And you can look at demographic trends and labor market analysis, StatsCan data. So for example, we can look at something like, again, if we're trying to hire PhDs, what's the trend in the labor market? Are there more PhDs in education than there used to be? And the answer is yes, there are. So that's actually a good trend for the supply of labor. Demographic trends. Well, there's a lot of people retiring in education right now. All right, some of them might want to, short-term gig, teaching at the end of their career. Maybe that's a possibility. Or other demographic trends is maybe they're just retiring to begin with. So the fact that maybe there's fewer older people, the PhDs will be younger people who will be you'll be looking at in order to try to fill those positions for the new education program. Okay, that's the supply of labor. You also look at the demand for labor. right? And there's external, organizational, and workforce. Okay, so economic developments, social political challenges, technological changes, and competitors. So economic developments, you talk about it being a employers or employees markets. And in Alberta, up until the last couple of years, it's really been an employees market. A lot of jobs and not a lot of people to take those jobs. Now it's probably looking more like an employer's market, right? There's a lot more employed people. The oil and gas is down here, so the demand for labor isn't as high as it was. Okay, so that would be a good thing for, if you're looking to hire. Social, political, legal challenges or changes. Sometimes a new law comes into place, okay, and you'll have to hire for that. A good example is privacy legislation a number of years ago. Okay, that came in, and places like the college had to hire a privacy person, right? So again, the demand for labor for a new position to deal with privacy is a good example of an external shock to the system here. Competitors, again, if we're looking for PhDs in education, you're competing against other colleges like the evil Lethbridge College. It's an evil place. I won't get into that. The evil Red Deer College, not quite as evil as Lethbridge, but still evil. You look at technological change. So, even things like Zoom, for example, who knows? Maybe we can get by with fewer instructors. Just take all these great taped lectures I've done, and they can live for years, save some money here. All right, so technology can also increase or decrease the demand for labor. Organizational demand for labor. Your strategic plan, your sales forecast, new ventures like a new program or a new organizational job design change. All right. So again, if your organization is growing and you're doing more stuff, you'll demand more labor. If you're staying the same, you probably get by with what you've got. If you're shrinking, like the city of Medicine Hat, for example, with budgets, they're going to be shrinking there. Their demand for labor, internal demand for labor, is going to go down there. And then the other part of demand for labor, you look at things like retirements, resignations, terminations, deaths, leaves of absence. Okay, so people talked about turnover or leaving the organization for a number of different reasons. What do those look like in the next couple of years? You have a whole bunch of old people here, a lot of gray hair, a lot of people over 55. Okay, will they be leaving really soon? Okay, either leaving through retirement or leaving through other ways as well, like death. And leaves of absence. At a college, there's something called sabbaticals, which many instructors can access usually every 7 to 10 years, right? So the fact that if you've got a lot of people who are eligible for sabbaticals, that will increase your demand for labor in order to backfill for those people. Okay, so that's your supply and demand, and it's all going to net back. Either you're going to have a surplus, okay, you're going to have too many people working and you have to get rid or redeploy some. You may be in equilibrium, which essentially you neither have to get rid or add people, or you could have a shortage, okay, in which you have to go out and find people. All right, so at the end of your forecasting, you determine whether you have a surplus, a equilibrium, or you have a shortage. All right, so let's cycle back then to number one. Quite a bit of stuff in that particular objective. Okay, discuss how to align the workforce planning with the organizational strategy. So essentially what you need to do is number one is, what are you trying to achieve? Okay, which is your strategy and your goals. Number two, what's happening with your people and the labor market? Okay, are your people hanging around? Do they have the right skills? What's happening in the labor market? Is there a shortage in the labor market? Is there a surplus in the labor market? And then, given all this, do you need to add people? Do you need to subtract people? Or are you good to go with the people you've got? All right, so that's what you're doing, talking about aligning your workforce planning with your organization strategy. Beat that one to death. Okay, objective 2, examine methods organizations use to deal with a labor surplus or shortage. Right, this one usually makes a really good midterm exam question here. All right. So what have we got here? Number 1, after you've done your forecasting there, is workforce management is you set some goals. Okay. And what do we talk about goals here? So, for example, setting a goal for Medicine Hat College might be we want to hire by April 2024 or April 2021, let's say. We want to hire 3 more PhDs in education. Okay, that might be a goal based on our forecasting. Or we might want to reduce the power engineering faculty by 2 instructors. Okay, so that's your goal based on what we've done there. Okay, so now if your goals can be, might require people to add employees, might require people to subtract employees. Let's look at adding employees first, okay? Sorry, subtracting employees. So what do you do when you have too many employees? Well, first one is downsizing. All right, so in order to get rid of people, firing people is a really fast way to do this. Amount of suffering caused, high, all right? It's not only bad for the people who get laid off, it's pretty bad for morale as well. Okay, there might also be notice and yeah, costs in order if you've got to get rid of a long-term people. Pay reductions will reduce everybody's pay, and demotions, okay? Speed of results fast. Are people, okay, now I got demoted or paid, forget it, I'm out of here, right? So you can get rid of people relatively fast using that amount of suffering high in both cases here. The other thing with reductions and demotions is something called constructive dismissal. You're changing the common law employment contract by doing this, so if you do this, people are entitled to notice. So there's also economic consequences to do this. It's not just you can't demote people or reduce their pay significantly as a excuse to to make them quit. All right, they are still, as opposed to just firing them, they're still they're entitled to notice or pay in lieu of notice. Transfers, okay, so you move somebody from one area to another area, okay, so you can do that relatively fast. If I can move a power engineering instructor, for example, into academic upgrading if he or she has the skills, okay, so I can do that fast. Amount of suffering caused, moderate. Reducing hours. Okay, you can do that, again, fast, moderate. It's not as bad as a demotion or pay reduction. Other ways to do it, a hiring freeze, okay, which is basically say we're not going to hire any new people and we'll just make do with what we've got. And so if somebody leaves, we'll just redeploy that person, okay. Attrition, if people leave, we don't replace them, which is kind of the same old thing. Again, eventually, we can hope that those 2 power engineering instructors leave on their own account. Yeah, and when they do, the amount of suffering low, but it could take a while. Early retirement. God love early retirement. It's what I got last year. It was beautiful. What basically they say is, here's a big bag of money, please quit and collect your pension. Okay, speed of results, slow, okay, because not everybody is at early retirement yet. Amount of suffering caused, very low. Okay, not a lot of suffering for me when I took my big bag of money. Not a lot of suffering from the organization. Well, maybe a little bit. Students miss me. And finally, retraining. So in a case like that, if we've got that power engineering student instructor, maybe we can get him or her to get a PhD in education. All right, that's probably going to take a little while to do that, but again, in order to solve the one problem, it's good that I can get rid of my power engineering instructor, but get them up to speed being a education prof, that's going to take a little bit of time, right? Okay, So those are the strategies for reducing surplus. Key thing is it's more than just firing people. There's other more creative ways to do that. Strategies when you have a shortage. Okay, so how to get more people in there? Well, the easiest one is just pay your existing people overtime. Okay, which is great. So if I've got a temporary shortage of labor, get people to pay overtime. Time and a half, people like it. Job gets done. Maybe it might cost a little bit more, right? Yeah, so it's also a very non-permanent thing to do. Temporary employees, contract employees, hire a temp, okay, almost the same as overtime. Outsourcing, so take a function that was formerly done by employees and get an outside firm to do that. Let's say janitorial is a really good example. Rather than having janitors who work for the college, just hiring a cleaning firm to come in. All right, and that's a great way to a fast way to affect a change is through outsourcing. Retained transfers. What do you mean by retained or retrained? Confused there. Okay, skip that one. Turnover reductions. Okay, so maybe we just make things better so people quit a lot less. Or yeah, so the fact that people quitting a lot less, that's fewer people we have to hire, right? So again, that's slow for speed of results and ability to change moderate. 2 new external hires must be important twice. Okay, so this is going out and hiring somebody. And last one is technological innovation. So essentially that would be replacing labor with the machine. Okay, so again, speed of results, it's a rather slow process. Ability to change labor or change later, low. Okay, something like that. Okay, so the obvious thing for a shortage would be to new external hires, full-time hires. Again, be creative. There's a lot of other different ways you could do that, some which are faster and give you more flexibility. All right, so collectively, these 2 slides, like I said, made a really good exam question. You should know those, the different options. All right, what else do we have on here? Workforce planning process, implementing and evaluation. So eventually the implementing evaluations is, did it work? Okay, so at the end of it all, were we able to hire those 3 new PhDs? Were we able to get rid of those 2 power and engineering instructors? Was it costly to the organization in terms of dollars, in terms of morale? Okay, yeah. And if it was there a better way to do it? So rather than hiring new ones, could we have got away with a temp? Could we have gotten away with doing overtime? Okay, so that's the evaluation part. Plan, do, check. This is the check part. Okay, 2 other issues here dealing with workforce planning here. The idea of employment equity comes into it. And again, employment equity, we talked about that, I think, in chapter 2. And the idea of employment equity is you might have a goal where you want your workforce to profile the demographics of your local area. Okay, so if 40% of the local workforce is women, is your workforce 40% of your workforce women? If 10% of your the workforce is people with disabilities, do you have 10% people with disabilities? And again, same sort of goals with Aboriginal employment and minority employment. So what essentially that means is when you're going back and you're thinking of adding people or you're thinking of reducing people, you're keeping in mind your employment equity goals. If I reduce the workforce, if I lay off those 2 power engineering instructors, how does that work with my employment equity goals? Okay, if they were one of those instructors were a woman, someone with a disability, a minority, or someone Aboriginal, is that going to affect what I'm doing there with those particular groups? Or again, if I'm adding people, if I'm hiring new people, again, if they're from one of those 4 designated groups, is this a way, if I'm not making my quotas in those areas, by hiring, giving preferential treatment to one of those people in one of those four designated groups? This might be a way to help with your employment equity. So employment equity then, when you're looking about reducing or looking about adding, is kind of a often feeds into the decisions that can be made with a lot of the decisions on adding employees or reducing employees. Okay, and the last one is succession planning, and that's the process of identifying and tracking high potential employees to fill top management positions. All right, get more of this on chapter 7 when we talk about development, but essentially what we're doing is is trying to identify who your superstars are and making sure those superstars are being groomed for higher positions, right? So in the context of a place like Medicine Hat College, taking a look at the who's a superstar dean. Is that superstar dean ready to move up to be a VP anytime soon? Who's a superstar instructor? Does that instructor also have management skills? Would he or she be a really good chairperson coming up in the next couple of years there, right? So it's identifying those superstars and then giving them developmental experiences to ensure that they're ready, all right? So that would be things like maybe giving them special projects, which leadership, maybe allowing them to go to conferences that'll give them, or management training, that'll give them those experiences to help them move up into those senior positions, all right? And one of the advantages of a succession planning is it really helps and attract and retain talent in place. So you want to hold on to your superstars. So if your superstars know that they're being groomed for these top management positions, this can really help with your retention of your superstars. Okay, so let's cycle back then to number 2 and review what that says. So examine the methods organization used to deal with a labor surplus or shortage. Okay, so labor surplus, how to get rid of people. Labor shortage, how to attract people. And essentially, it comes back to set goals. Okay, do we have to add X number of people? Do we have to get rid of X number of people? And then number 2, implement reductions. So reductions could be anything from the obvious one is just firing people to attrition to early retirement. Or if we need people, if we had to add people, the obvious one is just hiring new full-time employees, but there's other ways to do it, such as overtime or temps. All right. Okay, we're at objective 3 here, and the next 3 objectives, 3, 4, and 5, deal with recruiting. So the first of the 3 says, explore the importance of recruiting. So why is recruiting important? And describe the approaches to attracting talent. There's many different ways we can get people to apply to our company if we have an opening. All right. So recruiting human resources. So what is recruiting? Any activity carried out by the organization with primary purposes of identifying and attracting potential employees. So one of the things we talk about when we talk about recruiting is that the output or the goal of recruiting is to attract a large and qualified pool of applicants, all right, which isn't like a swimming pool, but that'd be interesting, right? A pool of applicants. It'd be a whole bunch of people, just hanging around in a swimming pool and we could pick from them. No, that's not a pool of applicants. That's just people in a swimming pool. But again, I digress. Focus. All right. So that's recruiting, right? Now with recruiting, there can be direct recruiting, and that would be something like purchasing an ad on a site like Indeed, for example, or going to a job fair. But recruiting can also be less direct. So sometimes you do some brand building. An accounting firm, for example, might sponsor a business case competition for Alberta colleges, right, with the hope of getting its name out there. And then when some of the really good accounting students graduate, they'll associate that accounting firm with being a great place to work, right? So it's not always necessarily direct things like going to a job fair. Brand building can also be considered a recruiting activity. All right, so 3 aspects that affect whom is hired, the 3 aspects that affect recruiting. One are human resource policies, and we'll deal with this in number 3, like learning objective 3. Okay, so like your pay policy, for example. Second one, which is in the learning objective 4, is recruitment sources. So where are you fishing? Okay, are you looking internally, externally? And if you're looking externally, are you looking at colleges? Are you looking at, I don't know, looking at poaching other employees? I guess is another, yeah, that's a possibility. And the last part, which deals with learning objective 5, recruiter traits and behaviors. So who you send out, the people you have as the face of your organization. All right, so let's just take a look at how those 3 things are knit together, the policies, recruiter traits and behaviors, and recruitment sources. And I'll give you an example. An example is this job that I just took, human resource management, 4 sections in the winter of 2021 here in Medicine Hat here. All right, so how did that affect, how did that affect them choosing me? How did that affect me applying for the job? Well, let's look at start with the vacancy characteristics. So what characteristics of the job, were attractive to me? Well, a couple things. Number 1 is that I had a lot of time on my hands, and it was in the winter. So, and I was going to have a lot of time on my hands in winter, so it was available. It was temporary. Okay, I don't want to work full time. I've been there, done that, right? So being done in April is really great for me. And then just of course the topic was human resource management, which is awesome, right? Some of the negative things about the job, which might have affected the pool of candidates, is 1, it's located in Medicine Hat. All right, not everybody wants to live in this lovely city. I certainly like it, but it's not necessarily for everybody. It pays really poorly. I'm really not going to lie. I'm doing this for charity, people. And yeah, so those point being, okay, sorry. And then recruiter traits and behaviors. So when I actually talked to the chair of the department and the dean of the department, they were very, very nice people, and that got me to apply, right? So those were the vacancy characteristics, okay, the human resource policy, the ways the job is put together, and sort of the people. Now, the applicant characteristics, okay. So this is who applies. So if I take a look at me as an applicant, well, I live in Medicine Hat. Let's see, I've got the degree, so I know the subject matter. And I'm willing to work for slave wages and willing to work in the winter. All right, so between the 2 of those, note that if the job were full-time, if the job were online, if the job were in some place other than Medicine Hat, the pool of applicants for this particular job might have been bigger than it actually was. All right. Might have somebody really outstanding, not that I'm outstanding, but I mean super outstanding, even more outstanding than me, could have applied for this job, right? All right, so those all feed into the pool of applicants, and then from the pool of applicants, they made their job choice. And I might add, not to brag, yeah, I am bragging, I love to brag, I think they made a really good choice in this case. All right, so let's look at one of the aspects there, which is the main point in Learning Objective 3, which is human resource policy. So how much you pay, your promotion policy, your company, your reputation, etc. All of these feed into how attractive your position is. All right. All right, so number 1, internal versus external recruiting. Promote from within policies make a organization more attractive. So if you apply to an entry-level job in a company with a promote from within practice, that really helps. You go, hey, this is great. Once I get in there, my chances of promotion are going to be a lot better than companies that just every time they hired managers. although these promote from within policies can have some advantages, they can also have disadvantages. I know when they brought deans in at the Grand Prairie Regional College, it wasn't very popular with a lot of the faculty. So what they did is they made a promote from within policy. So they ended up getting 3 people who applied for the Dean of Business, and yeah, they weren't good. And it didn't end well with that particular one. So yeah, particularly when your position has expertise and you may not have that expertise, you may want to, within the organization, you may want to stray from an internal recruiting policy. Okay, second part, lead the market pay strategy. So essentially, if you have better pay and benefits or different pay and benefits than somebody else, that can give you a competitive advantage. Obviously, people would rather work at the place that pays more, generally speaking, or sometimes it's benefits. I was on a trip to Vermont a couple of years ago, and I toured the Ben & Jerry's ice cream factory, which was really, really cool. And one of the cool benefits they had is every shift you work, you could take a pint of ice cream home. All right, so the fact that, hey, I could work at Jimmy JoJo's ice cream factory, I could work at Ben & Jerry's, and Ben & Jerry's gives me a free pint every shift, I'm sold. You know, I'm going to apply to Ben & Jerry's. And the last part, which is kind of related to a lot of this, the first two, is the whole idea of employment branding, okay? So essentially having a really good rep, and a really good example of that is my son recently graduated from university with an accounting degree, and he and his colleagues were applying for a number of positions, right? And the prime positions were if you got a job with one of the big 4 firms. Okay, and the big 4 firms, I'm not sure who they are, Ernst & Young is one, and KPMG is another, and 2 ones, right? So those were the ones that everybody wanted to work for, right? Because they, I don't know, more successful people came out of those firms. They tended to pay a little bit better. And yeah, it was just one of those things, right? So yeah, you wanted to work for a big 4 firm rather than another firm, right? So yeah. All right, so yeah, so put simply, you'd rather work for somewhere like Ernst & Young than Jimmy JoJo's House of Accounting and Shoe Repair. Although I'm sure Jimmy JoJo is a fine employer, but doesn't have the cachet, that's a good word, cachet, that Ernst & Young does. Okay, so we'll cycle back then on learning objective 3, talks about the importance of recruiting and approaches to attracting talent. So why is it important? Essentially, if you're going to get a good pool of applicants, you have a better chance of getting a good employee. Have you ever heard the term garbage in, garbage out? So by having a good recruiting strategy, you're going to avoid having garbage in. So your chances of having garbage out or making a poor hiring choice are reduced. And describe the approaches to attracting talent. Well, you can decide whether you're going internal versus external. Having a good pay and benefits policy and other total rewards policy, which we'll talk about in chapter 8. And finally, having a good employment brand. Again, people want to perceive you as one of the big 4 accounting firms rather than Jimmy JoJo's House of Accounting and Shoe Repair. All right, moving on to objective number 4. Objective number 4, right here. Okay, objective number 4, compare and contrast recruiting sources. All right, this also tends to make a really good midterm question. All right. So there are 2 major types of sources. There are internal sources and there are external sources. So internal sources are people who are already working for you. All right, so many organizations may emphasize internal sources for job applicants, all right, for upper level positions. Advantages of that, of hiring somebody who's already in the organization, well, they're well known, so you know what you get. In fact, oftentimes if you have an internal candidate and an external candidate for the same positions, I've always thought that the internal candidate sometimes is at a disadvantage because you know their warts, you know their bad points rather than the good points. For the external candidate, it's tougher to get a handle on some of their bad points. Anyway, but they are well known, so you know what you're getting. Usually cheaper and faster than looking outside, so promoting somebody from within the organization is generally quicker than trying to bring someone in. And enhanced employee morale. Oftentimes, if you just get a brand new manager from the outside, they come in, they know everything, they're the expert from out of town. Sometimes that has negative impact on morale. All right, so that's the advantages of going internally. Externally, okay, organizations oftentimes have good reasons to go outside. Number one, no internal recruits for some entry-level positions. Let's say, for example, you're Tim Hortons and you need to get some new counter staff. Well, who at Tim Hortons already working at Tim Hortons would consider it a promotion or even a lateral move to be a counter staff? Not too many people, because that's the entry level, right? So you're not going to get entry level people generally from your internal, because they already have a as good or better job, right? Or specialized positions. Okay, I may be a hospital and I want to try to attract a cardiovascular surgeon. All right, and so I could look at my regular surgeons and none of them have specialty in heart, so I have to go outside for that. Or it could be a super, super difficult position, right? Imagine you were trying to attract a cardiovascular surgeon. That would be a large fish who was able to perform heart surgery. Could you imagine trying to find, a large fish who can perform heart surgery in your hospital? Not likely. You have to go outside. And again, I digress. Har har. That was a joke. Move on, Bill. Move on. Okay. Advantages external is they bring new ideas. So you get guys like me who taught for 30 years in Grand Prairie, and they've got great new ideas about how we can do things differently here, right? And you can attract a more diverse workforce if you go external. And again, go back to employment equity. If you have a policy of trying to get your demographics for women, Aboriginals, disabled, and what's the other one I'm missing? The other one I'm missing, Aboriginals, disabled, and minorities. If you want to get your demographics in line with what your workforce is, going external is another opportunity to get closer to those goals if you're short of those goals there. Okay, what else there? Okay, external sources. Okay, so those are generally internal and external sources. Some specific external sources you can have are direct applicants. So these are people who kind of just show up, the people who mail in a resume, or the people who kind of drop in and drop off a resume. And example of that, or advantage of that, is that they're interesting. Okay, if they're so interested, they really want to work in here, they haven't even waited for a posting to come out, those people are keeners. They like you, so that's the first part. Referrals. So a referral are people who apply because someone in the organization prompted them or aided them in self-selection. All right, so basically a family member, a buddy, or something like that. Some organizations have referral programs. So if you refer a person who ends up getting hired, you get a little bonus, things like that. Those can be really good because oftentimes if people are referring to people, they're reasonable people, so it's a little bit of a screening. The problem with referrals is you tend to get people who are like people who are already in your organization. All right, so again, if you're trying for diversity, or you want to get new people in with new ideas, referrals tend to be more of the same rather than brand new or innovative people. Job seekers. These are individuals who are not actively seeking a job, but are a significant source of top talent. So the cynical way would be is go poach good people from your competitors. Another way to look at it is just like if you're selling anything, and when you're recruiting, you're selling your organization, right? You just tell people, hey, I'm selling this stuff. Back when I was a chair of the department in Grand Prairie, I ran into a woman at Safeway one day, and she had worked for us previously, was a great temporary instructor, but she'd gone back out and got a job in industry. And I said, hey, Gwen, we got an opening now. You want to come work for us? And she goes, well, you know, I hadn't really thought about coming back and teaching. Well, she thought about it, applied for the job, got it, and worked there for the next 15 years, right? So just, like I said, just reaching out and saying, hey, people, we've got an opening, right? Just kind of on a one-to-one basis. Other external sources, so digital recruiting, so involves posting a company website, social media platforms. This is a little bit behind the times here. LinkedIn for sure, but you would add things like Glassdoor and Indeed here, right? And that's probably the go-to way now of recruiting, is obviously using your company websites and digital tools like LinkedIn, Twitter, and particularly places like Indeed and Glassdoor. Traditional ads. So your traditional ads would be the want ad, the ad in the paper. What else? So sometimes you could buy an ad in a magazine, like the accountant's magazines, professional magazine they have. That would be an example there. Even radio. For whatever reason, I was in Grand Prairie. Radio tend to be a really good way to attract people for a lot of oil field jobs, for example, or billboards or signage or things like that, right? Generally, these ads, I guess, less desirable groups of applicants at a greater expense. These are expensive, all right, and you tend to get a lot of people in there who may not be qualified, right? Not targeted enough advertising, I guess, is a good way of looking at this. And finally, public agencies. So best example of this is the Government of Canada Job Bank, which is free for people. So if you got a job, you know, put it on Job Bank GC. So let me show you what that looks like now. So here's the Government of Canada Job Bank. So you can put your posting on here. So let's say, for example, we're looking for a customer service manager. And we can look in, how about Medicine Hat, Alberta? And hit search. And lo and behold, the TD Bank is looking for some. So the TD Bank obviously put this up on the job bank. Click on that. Give you a couple details, and they said their posting is actually posted on another site, which is jobpostings.ca. So the Royal Bank was able to, they were able to take advantage of the government website, jobbank.ca. So it's a pretty good resource that you can use, if you've got a job opening. And a couple other external sources. You have staffing companies, and there's two types. One are called private companies, and these be like employment agencies, so people who provide temps to you, okay, or generally, temporary, like an office staff. Or you have executive search firms, sometimes known as headhunters. So if you were looking at that's a great, what do you call it? That's a great term, headhunters. Okay, so a headhunter would go out and try to find you somebody like like a vice president or president for the college, right? So these are pretty high-end job search people, right? So yes, you can use executive search firms, but you're looking at only for really difficult or high-priced jobs to do that. You wouldn't send out an executive search firm to try to find people to work the counter at Tim Hortons. And finally, the last one is university colleges and placements. University colleges. So having co-ops, internships, job fairs, sometimes colleges and university placement services that are a really good source of employees then. Okay, so at the end of all this, you need to evaluate your recruitment sources periodically, right? So you have two things. One is your yield ratio, so expresses the percentage of applicants who actually you hire. So your yield ratio might be if we got 100 people to apply from Indeed, and of those 100 people who applied from Indeed, we hired 5 of them. That would be a 5% yield ratio. Okay, if we got 100 people from an ad in the paper, and we hired 0 of those people out of the 100, yield ratio from that would be a 0, right? So your yield ratio is 1, and the other one is your cost per hire. How much did it cost to use that recruitment store? So the ad in the paper, let's say that ran us $500. Okay, and we hired 2 people out of it. The cost per hire for that ad would be $250. If the website cost us $15 and we hired 3 people, the cost per hire for that website would have been $5. All right, so those are 2 things. So essentially what it's saying is your yield ratio will tell you, if you're fishing in good waters, and your cost per hire will tell you how much you're spending. So do the math. Am I fishing in good waters? All right. Did that ad in the paper really help? Did posting on Indeed really help? All right. And then the cost. All right. How much did I spend doing that? Okay. So to recap, number 4. Compare and contrast recruitment sources. There's various sources. You have internal sources, okay, like your current employees. You have external sources like ads or headhunters. So you use both, and periodically see what's working and what's not, and then do the math. See what that's costing you. Okay, the final one here is Objective 5, and it talks about the recruiter's role. Okay, and that has nothing to do with whether your recruiter is portly or rotund and has rolls of adipose tissue around his or her midriff. That is an R-O-O, R-O-L-L, not an R-O-L-E. Okay, that has nothing to do with this. Har, har, har. It's a bad pun. All right, so what about the recruiter's role? Single slide here. Essentially, be careful who you hire for the role of recruiter, because the recruiter is your salesperson and your face of the company. They may be the first person that the potential employee gets to see, and that will leave either a good and or bad impression, right? And first impressions are important, as the old saying says. Okay, so who do you get? Well, you have a choice between 2 people for recruiters. You can use a specialist in HR, somebody from HR who's a recruiting specialist, or sometimes you get people who are actually doing the job or have done the job. Okay, or sometimes you have a combination of both, and I'll talk about that down here. What else? So you need to know the recruiter basically can provide the right type of information, so they know a lot about the company, know about the job, and also do a realistic job preview. And essentially what that is telling both the good and bad points about a job. You don't want to oversell the position and get somebody in there for 3 months and find out, man, this sucks. Okay, I didn't expect this. So it's important that both the good and bad aspects are talked about when recruiters talk about a job, because you don't want to hire somebody who's going to quit 3 months down the road. And the last part, enhancing the recruiter's impact, timely feedback. So you want to get a recruiter who gets back to people, okay, checks their phone call, messages, checks their text, checks their email. And the last part is recruiting teams. So quite often you'll get supervisor and an HR person will go out and recruit at a job fair. Again, back when I was in Grand Prairie, when the accountant firms came in every year, they do little recruiting sessions, and they would have an HR person, generally a recent grad, somebody who'd gone to GPRC a year or so ago, and then a couple of different staff accountants or managers as well. So recruiting teams can make a lot of sense. Okay, we're not going to recap 5 because that was only one slide. So we'll go to the final part. And let's go like this. Okay, I'll go to the final part. And the final part here is a summary here. All right, so the summary of workforce planning and recruiting. Okay, number 1, overall, workforce planning is a component of your HR strategy, okay, and it feeds into your organizational strategy. So again, the way to wrap your head around that, if the college has an audacious goal of offering its own program, 4-year degree in education, the workforce planning component of that is the people part of that, is being able to staff that position, okay, with people, all right, in order to offer a 4-year degree in education. Second one, the organization needs to advantage and disadvantages of eliminating a surplus or avoiding shortage of labor. Okay, so you need to know the ways we can add. That could be things like overtime, temporary workers, or if we have to, hiring a new full-time employee, and the ways to subtract. Okay, we could terminate people, we could reduce by attrition, or we could reduce my all-time favorite way through early retirement. So know the pros and cons of each, and why some are quicker than others. That's important for that one. And the last 3 objectives deal with recruiting. 3 things about recruiting is, number 1, you want to make the jobs attractive through your HR policies, pay, benefits, presentment, and branding. Second one, you want to be able to recruit in a lot of different areas, and also areas that are going to get you good applicants, right? So basically, cast a wide net when you're fishing, okay? And your sources are internal and they are external. And the final one is recruiter plays a critical role in the recruitment process, okay? So make sure you select good people or persons as recruiters, because they are the face of your company, and first impressions are often lasting impressions. All right, get or got or good. That was chapter 4. Next up is one of my favorite chapters, which deals with selection. Okay,